Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and with me today is not someone who's actually from our home team here in Sacramento, but like we've talked about before, we like to bring in guests sometimes that can bring value to our home team. And today we have Spellman, performance speed coach and founder of More Her Speed, Cici Murray. What's going on?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I'm assuming it's a crazy busy schedule because you had someone help you book this podcast. And anytime someone has someone like, hey, you need to talk to my assistant, like, oh, we're dealing with one of those guests that are incredibly busy. So I'm just thankful that you're able to squeeze us in.
Oh yeah, no, Katie is great. She helps out so much, mostly because I'm so bad with social media and marketing and anything on that front. So it's less about my busy schedule and more about me probably being a little less confident than her on doing this kind of stuff. So
I don't know.
shout
I don't think.
out
I don't.
to
Yeah. I don't know if any of that's true, but I will say that Katie was awesome to work with. We scheduled it super fast, and she was very kind as we were going through that whole process. And we'll talk more about the social media stuff and all of that because I don't believe that you're bad at it because I think you're really good at it. But that's okay. We'll save that until a little bit later. Right now, we want to start off by hearing a little bit more about your background, your athletic background, your coaching background, and basically how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's funny. I grew up all around sports. I grew up, playing different things, and I obviously kind of switched and landed in volleyball. I was mediocre at best in a sport that didn't focus on speed at all. So any running that they had us do was running around the court, or if we got in trouble, we did bear crawls. But other than that, like I didn't have an intense speed background. So that probably comes along with part of this journey, and what has led me to this point is just a lot of research and a lot of time spending studying and reading and doing everything else that kind of comes with getting to know a new territory. Like I said, I always grew up in sports and around it. So I graduated with a kinesiology major. So um, I obviously knew a lot about the body and how it moved. I focused a lot on strength and conditioning and athletic training. So I had a very hands-on major, which I was grateful for. I went to Cal State Fullerton, and they are much more functional than I would say academic. Like I didn't have to take physics or chem to graduate. And when I was thinking about going with the PT route, that like worried me so much, because to do anything in continued education with that, like you have to have those, to apply to anything. So brings me to, I worked in a physical therapy office pretty much all throughout college. And I'm super grateful for that opportunity. I learned so much there and learned a lot about scheduling and time management, and how to deal with multiple things at once. So we were very client heavy there. So I was grateful to work with the clientele that I did. I through that office ended up coaching like my own 7-on-7 team. So that was a really great experience. I learned a lot from those two coaches who I worked under. I always, annoyed them with questions and sat in on all their chalk talks and whiteboard meetings and all that, just to, kind of learn more. So football was kind of like my niche. So I, was training those kids for free on the weekends, and kids that I knew from the physical therapy office. I was just like, oh, come out this weekend. And, they're like, oh, for what? And I'm like, oh, I just want to see something. I want to see, like what works and what doesn't. And it just kind of like progressed from there. I linked up with an NFL guy who was super cool. He was injured, and I helped him out with his rehab. And when he was done, he was like, "Oh, you should help me out with with all of my strength and range of motion stuff." And I was like, "Okay, awesome."
Wow.
So yeah, I ended up, it was just kind of fell into my lap. And these are the kind of situations where it's like I'll never say that I got handouts or anything like that. I think it all comes from just being a good person and doing good work and doing honest work. So after he was, good to go on the strength and range of motion side, I was just like, oh, we should get you on the field. And he's like, what, with you? And I'm like, yeah, like, I knew what he had to do in the game. I knew, what position he played and what demands he was needed for. So I was just like, yeah, let's see what happens. And so I did. And after, he was like, hey, you got to run with this. Whatever you do, like, you just got to run with this. So that's where kind of like my lane in football kind of started. Was I was just like, okay, maybe there is a need for this, and maybe I can, help people by doing this. So from there, I was at another sports rehab place, and that's actually where I met Les. So he brought one of his NFL guys in that I happened to also be working with, and he came in with him one day, and he left the office and he was like, hey, I really like you. You do really good work. My team really likes you. My guy really likes you. Let me know, if at any point you want to work in the future or something like that. So I ended up leaving that office a couple weeks later, and I called up Les and was just like, hey, let's connect, let's link, let's work. And he was like, yeah, for sure. He's like, pull up on me tomorrow at 5 in the morning, and I think a couple of my guys, just come say hi. And so I was like, okay, cool. So came over at 5 in the morning to this high school field, and I knew some of his guys, so that was already a nice introduction. And literally from that day, I just never left. He was like, whatever we do, like, I can't lose you on this team. So I just kind of found my place and was just very resourceful, and tried to soak up everything that I could. And whenever I wasn't doing something, I was watching what somebody else was doing. And I was, like I said, it was combine training 2020, and right before COVID. And so we were working with a bunch of guys at this field. And so, yeah, if I wasn't needed in one area, then I just went and I learned something from somebody else. So again, I think that this journey has been very intense, as far as trying to gather different knowledge and knowing where I fit in, and knowing when to like kick back and knowing when to speak up. And but that's the only thing that's really gotten me to this point, is just being eager to learn and not being scared to ask questions and not being scared to be wrong. I've been wrong a lot, so it's been, like I said, it's been a journey. I've gotten it wrong a lot, but now I'm here and I feel, confident in myself as a coach. So it's a good feeling.
That's awesome. That's an incredible journey. Such a cool path. And it's cool that honestly, out of everything you've just said, I think the thing that has stuck out the most was what you said about your willingness to learn and your willingness to basically evolve, right? Whatever the situation called for, you were willing to research, look into it, and figure out how you could make yourself the most useful as possible in that arena, wherever you found yourself. And I feel like it's one of the greatest benefits of having an athletic background is that you have that competitiveness inside of you, and it's whatever it takes you're going to do, and you're going to outwork everybody. You're going to put the time in that maybe someone else is not willing to, because they don't have that same mindset. And that's something we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit, because everybody has the desire to play D1, or they have the desire to play at the professional level. But the reality is, and it's probably better than anybody, the reality is it's not meant for everybody. Everybody's not going to get there. It's a very small percentage that gets to D1, and then beyond that, an even smaller percentage. But that doesn't mean that you can't still work in the world of sports and still be crazy passionate about something that you love doing that's still related to sports. And so I think what you have done with your career so far is amazing. And I think it's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it definitely, has required a lot from me, but I've learned so much from my players. I think that is also a huge factor that, we don't factor in. Is I've had mentors, of course, and, less and all my previous bosses, but I've learned so much from my players on how to be a better person and how to be a better coach, that I've just, like I said, as the years go on, I feel like I'm just kind of perfecting it more. And like I said before, it's not like I go out perfect every day. I'm still making mistakes. I'm still learning from that. And again, I'm not scared to ask why, or I'm not scared to be wrong, just because if somebody has a different opinion, or if I can learn from somebody else, then it's a win for us both.
Right. And do you think that that's something that athletes struggle with, this idea of asking for help? Because I feel like, from my perspective, athletes that I was friends with and athletes that I've interacted with over the years, and even sometimes coaches, there's that competitiveness, and it sometimes can go into the direction of being super prideful about what you're doing, which is good. You want to have pride about what you're doing, but there's also a certain level you hit where it's like, now I feel like you're not listening, or not willing to listen or try to learn from anybody else. And that's where you start getting into a weird spot where I think some of your weaknesses start coming out because you're just not, willing to be somewhat humble when you're interacting with other people. Do you feel like that's something that, I mean, I'm sure everybody deals with that, any person, whether they're athletes or not, but do you feel like that's something that athletes specifically maybe have to wrestle with a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. I think that people put athletes on such a high pedestal, and so it brings them to a certain point. And I hear so many regular pedestrians always say, "Oh, athletes need to humble themselves," and it's like at a certain point, the way that they are and the places that they've gotten themselves to, they deserve to celebrate themselves, and they deserve to not be humble every once in a while because they have worked so hard. We see people tweeting from the couch talking about how slow this guy is or how bad that route was, and it's like, do you know how hard it is to play at that level?
Yeah.
So I think that athletes get a bad rep about that sometimes, but going from athletic background to coaching, I definitely think and would say that they struggle with things that we struggle with all the day, like times 10, because like I said, they're under more pressure and people do put them to a higher standard. So I think that sports and athletics are just as much a mental game as they are physical. And having that kind of mental toughness about them, I think once you get to the elite level and pro level, it becomes a little bit easier because they are surrounded by that stuff all the time. And they do have so many people every day always like just wanting a piece of the pie from them. So I think that once they find their niche, once they find their coaches and their trainers that they know that they trust, it becomes less, oh, I know what I'm doing, and more, how can you help me? And that's kind of what I've seen just coaching from youth up into NFL and Olympic athletes. Like, they are at a point now where they've worked with a lot of people and they've been given a lot of different advice. So that's part of the buy-in process, is them knowing that you have your best interest. And from there, I don't think that that is a factor because they know, that you're there to help them and they know that you know what you're talking about.
I'm glad you said that. You're making my job easy because that was actually a question I had for you, was this idea of trust, right? Because to your point, and you said it great, but the idea that sometimes when a new coach comes in, or a new trainer, or a new person, even sometimes a teammate, right? A new teammate comes into a team. I think athletes in general have this idea of like, you got to show me something before I can really trust you. Like, why should I trust you? What are the reasons why I would give you my time and my effort? Like, show me why. And I think, coaches have had to earn that respect. And we've seen it at every level, whether it's high school, college, professionals, those times when the coach doesn't have the locker room, it's an absolute nightmare for everybody involved. And then you see the teams that the coach owns the locker room, and the players would run through a brick wall for that player, or for that coach, because he has that much trust and support. So for you as a trainer, the same thing goes, right? Like when you work with a new athlete, there has to be that level of trust, and they have to know that they can trust you. So it's kind of a two-part question, but how do you develop and gain that trust from your athletes? And if you follow CC on social media, and maybe you don't, but you should, when you look at your profile, it seems like you work with a lot of men, and you work with both men and women, but it seems like there's a decent amount of men that you work with. Is there an extra level that you have to go to gain the trust from some of these guys? Like, or are they just, hey, you're an athletic trainer, we trust you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I get asked this question more than you'd think probably, but
I almost didn't want to ask it for that reason, but I'm like, I think I have to
no,
ask it, but go
no.
ahead.
No, I think my answer changes every time almost. Like the message stays the same, but I do learn more and more every day coaching different athletes. My younger girls are actually my hardest group to train. And it sounds kind of crazy, but they're my hardest to buy in. And at that age, I think that it's hard for anybody to buy in. Their attention is elsewhere. They want to be doing other things. Running's not fun for them. So I think that I have had to find my way on how to connect with each different group. So my coaching, my training stays the same, my work stays the same, but how I approach them might be a little bit different. So working with NFL players or guys, it's pretty easy. I can just go up to them and, talk shit or make a joke or talk about music and they think it's funny, and then I can also give them a helpful cue. But I don't go into any of these sessions thinking that they're going to trust me right away. I go into every single session knowing that they probably don't trust me yet.
Mm.
And it comes back to them buying in is a product of what I show them. So I would say that if I have athletes, guys that I trained for Combine 2020 that come back now, they might not have been bought in 2020. They might not have trusted me in 2020, but they saw me 2020, they saw me 2021, they saw me 2022, and they saw that the work that I put in. So I go off of, I've mentioned this probably before on another podcast or interview, but I had one quarterback, Dakota Prukop, who, I first met him in 2020, and he was talking about this buy-in process that, and he's the first person that I was like, oh, I don't think he trusts me. And that didn't offend me or bother me. It was more so like, I'm not going to change who I am, but I'm just going to continue to show up and do the work. And then, by the time it was next year, he's like, man, you're still here. Like, we've gone through, plenty of interns and people through this team that, maybe haven't stuck or haven't put in the work, or they haven't seen me carrying sleds and weight plates and equipment to and from the field. So once they see, that one, you practice what you preach, and two, that you really do care about them and the work and the team, then, they will run through a wall for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like on the flip side of that with athletes, I feel like for a lot of athletes, once they trust someone, it's kind of becomes like a ride or die situation at that point, right? Like once they trust someone, you're kind of part of the family, and they would do anything for you. So it is a really cool relationship,
Yeah.
whether it be trainers and athletes or coaches and athletes or athletes and athletes. Like it is a special bond. And it's always a bummer when you see, coaches or trainers not fully accept or understand the responsibility of that. Because we've seen, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. I know I've seen it where it's like, man, I feel like you're putting a lot of time and effort for something that is not going to like yield great results because your focus is wrong. Like you don't see these people as human beings or you know, people. You see them as pawns that you can move around to get what you're trying to do, whether it be a championship or a better job. And it's just a bummer to see that. So it's awesome to hear someone like yourself that has that level of concern and passion for the athletes you work with, because it's not like, if we're honest, it's not just making a difference in their speed, it's making a difference in their life, which is a pretty cool thing that you guys get to do.
Yeah, no, 100%. They always say that that's like the best part about me is my relationship skills, because I call most of our athletes once a week and, just check in, or, guys are just starting preseason. So I'm calling them once a week, FaceTiming them once a week, bothering them probably. But, at the end of the day, like they really appreciate that. And those are the guys that come back every year. Those are the guys that we do maintain these really solid relationships with, that they know we're not just in it for one combine 8-week period. We're in it for the rest of your career. That's what we want. And they always ask, oh, well, what's the best part of your job? And it's like seeing these guys do well. They're always going to have these roller coaster emotions, these ups and downs, these highs and lows, injuries, or not making the 53 man or whatever it is. But being able to continue to support them and, like I said, maintain those relationships. This industry is all about relationships, but between athletes and coaches, or coaches and coaches, like relationships and relationship building is so important. We say this all the time, even between coaches and trainers and everybody else in this field. It's important that we connect, and we all want the same thing. We all want what's best for the athlete, unless you're not in it for the right reason. So at the end of the day, it's not a competition. We want to be putting people on. That's kind of our point. So it's funny that you're in Sacramento. We did a camp up there not too long ago, this past summer, on our Speed City tour in San Jose, and some people from Sacramento came, and it was just great connecting with them. And what we noticed, one thing is, when we were done and we were just chopping it up with everybody, they were like, man, like, we have not seen coaches and trainers that are this likely to put something on in another place and stay afterwards and get lunch and just willing to talk game with everybody. But, we have our system and everybody has their own system. So it would be a disservice to us to not, share that with other people.
I love that. Yeah, that's a mentality that a few people on this podcast have shared. I think of like Gabe Lemon from G6 Training and Blair Orr from Lead Performance. Together they started something called the Sacramento Athletic
Yeah.
Coalition with that whole idea of, and I don't know how often they meet, but they just get together with all of these trainers throughout Sacramento and they just hang out and talk. It might be at a bar one time, it might be at a field another, but the whole idea of, like you said, building that community, because the bottom line is this, and we've said this about coaches. Like if you have a whole football staff, right, and you have the head coach may not connect with, say, the court, or one of the wide receivers, right, but they connect really well with one of the other coaches. That's kind of why you have the support staff there, is because that they're in good hands with one of your assistant coaches. And it's kind of like the same with you guys as trainers. The bottom line is not because you're a bad trainer or the athlete's a bad listener. It's just there may not be that connection, but if you know that there's other trainers out there that can help that athlete, like what's better than that? It's obviously
Right.
you want them to train with you and you believe that you can get them to where they're trying to go. But if there's other people out there, I think that's a pretty cool thing. So it's awesome that it seems like there's this. I mean, I haven't come across anybody who's been ultra competitive that just wants to smash everybody that's in their sight when it comes to the competition. So it's cool that there's so many of you guys that share that same mentality of sharing information and the main goal being, let's make these athletes faster and stronger. Like I love that. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think there's gaps in every system also, or every team.
Sure.
Me and Les and JP and Dylan, we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, and we can pick each other up, and support each other. And that's what's so important about a team, is knowing kind of who's best at what and who can maintain that. And like I said, just kind of filling the gaps or helping other teams fill the gaps. We don't have it all figured out, of course, but we have a good system down that we have no problem sharing.
I love that. That's awesome. Do you get nervous when you see one of your athletes on TV during game day, or are you just excited? So I feel like this answer, I asked this question to a lot of trainers and people who work with athletes at that level, and the answer always kind of varies. Like depends on the personality, but for you specifically, like how do you feel when you get a chance to see one of your athletes compete?
It's the best day of my life. I mean, that's just the joy of putting it all together. Sometimes we'll see them warming up and we're like, oh, that's our warm up. Like we love that, or that's the best thing for us, is we'll see during games something that we worked on during training where it's like, okay, cool, that added up, or that really helped them. So I think that, like I said, that's one of the rewarding parts, is being able to witness their success, and not being like, oh, I had some part of that, but just knowing that something that you did resonated with them, that they're taking with them and using and making themselves better. Like, that's, we see teams posting drills and warm-ups and stuff like that, and we're like, oh man, thank God we prepared them for that.
Yeah.
So I think that I wouldn't say nervous. Our warm up is our workout, and we prep these guys really well for the demands, and that's kind of how our training and our programming has progressed. Is we did start being in contact with some of these teams and knowing what their load was going to be when they started camp, and kind of matching that and making sure that they were going to be able to hit the same speeds and the same demands that they're going to be using when they get to camp as they were going to be doing in training.
That's interesting, and this might be like a really simple question that I just know nothing about. But when you work with a team like that, are there like certain guidelines that a team will put out there as far as who they can work with and who they can't, or are there certain things that you guys as a company have to meet in order for you guys to work with certain athletes from certain programs?
So the cool thing about it is that since we are like an independent speed company, anybody can come to us during the off season. So it doesn't matter what team you play for. Most of our business comes from word of mouth. Like I said, we train a guy for combine, he comes back for off season and he brings 3 of his teammates with him. So, we notice that if we have a good amount of guys from a particular team, like, hey, we want to make sure that we are doing what we need to be doing on our side to get them prepared. So we will reach out, maybe with the strength and conditioning staff, or, whoever we need to reach out to be sure, and they respect that on their side, because then they get to OTAs or they get to camp and they start balling out and they're like, okay, cool, what were you guys doing, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that that's, like I said, that's part of the journey, but just kind of tailoring our program to, even from right before OTAs to right before camp, is two different training programs. You know, we're giving more exposure to, you know, change of direction, in-game speed, and that kind of thing. So, you know, just all goes with the program.
Gotcha. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the social media, like I mentioned before, because despite what you said, I feel like you do a really good job on social media. Sometimes I see people that we follow. I'm like, dang, I'm jealous. I feel like we could do so much more, and I realize I'm not doing nearly enough on social media. But you obviously do a really good job. That's how we kind of got connected with you in the first place. Also, I want to say this, and I hope this is not offensive. Uh, but I'm not gonna lie. Based on your social media, you seem very intense. And when I booked this, I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm getting. So I was prepared for someone who was like fired up all the time.
Oh
So
my God.
do you get that very often? Do like people expect like you to be like this super intense trainer all the time?
You know, I am shocked at how many people say that they're so intimidated by me. And you know, I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe, and I don't know if my players would say the same. In my mind, I come off very outgoing and everything, but in everybody else's mind, they're always like, "Oh, I was scared to approach you. Like you scared me." I was like, "Really?" So, you know, I don't, like I said, I'm very much so authentic to my core. So I talk to you the same way I talk to my players, the same way that I talk to my parents. So, you know, I don't know how that probably changes over social media. I guess I am exactly that way. So, but you know, on social media, it's always a little bit laughable, because they'll catch us when we're, you know, when I'm just talking to my players like I always talk to my players, you know, and they catch little snippets of me, you know, giving them static, and so I like including that within my educational content, because I don't ever want to lose sight of that authenticity through my brand. You know, that is part of my brand. That is part of what makes me a good coach. Is, you know, I am undoubtedly always myself. So I think that that's really important. And my players can sense that, athletes can sense that. They know, you know, when somebody is being true, or when somebody, you know, is acting a certain way, or, you know, wants a piece of the pie, or whatever it is. So I treat NFL players the same way I treat a janitor down the street. You know, it doesn't change. So, um, you know, you can always tell where the sharks are in the pond, and like I said, who just kind of wants to be a part of it versus who has your best interest. So social media, but like I said, social media is all, for me, accredited to my team, to Katie, my brand manager, to Drew, my head of marketing, Nate. All of them are, you know, they work, Nate and Christian, they would just work endlessly on, you know, our content. And it I wouldn't be anywhere on my social media without them. I mean, I started, I think, like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, at like 4 or 5 thousand followers. And you know, it's just it's grown, and the algorithm is funny. You never know what video is going to blow up, or what's going to do well and what's not. Doesn't mean I delete anything that doesn't do well, or, you know, anything. I just kind of let it ride out. And like I say, some things pop off. And my most controversial video comes from people in the comments, you know, asking if that's like a sports bra, and saying that, you know, oh my gosh, I
Wow.
never in 2022, I just never thought that that would be the responses that I get. And, you know, I tweet kind of from the heart. Twitter's more of like, you know, my raw personality. And, you know, I said it on there a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh, well, you know, if you're new to data driven training, like, just say that. You know, I'm surprised that at this point that people don't know what a GPS vest is. So it all, people, you know, I let them argue with themselves in my comments, and you know, I just keep posting what I post.
That's good. Whatever term you just used, that went way over my head. So I'm clearly not part of the
But
speed performance
yeah,
training world.
yeah, no, that's okay. So we use GPS with most of our athletes. So it tracks their speed, it tracks their distance, their, you know, time of session, their imbalances. a bunch of metrics that we end up using later to profile the athletes, or anything that we end up doing with that data. But it's a GPS vest that the tracker goes into in the back. And there's days where it's 110 degrees out on the field, and so they're wearing their shorts and they'll just wear the vest because they're not going to put a shirt on over it or under it. They might as well just wear the vest. And so we were in Vegas, and yeah, it was probably 120 degrees on the field, and one kid was wearing a vest, and so the comment section just went berserk.
Really? That's so bizarre to me.
Mm.
Well, the comment section is weird. Anyways,
It
we
is.
don't struggle with that problem. Most of the time the comments we get are like from, hey, promote this, and like it's just all that spam garbage that
Right.
we get.
DM to get verified.
Yeah, it's like I get really excited, like, oh, look at all this engagement. It's like, oh no, it's just a bunch of nonsense. But um
Yeah.
that's interesting. So do you enjoy the social media stuff, or do you feel like it's some yeah, there you go.
No. They clown me all the time, but I'm really bad at social media. I told you that before. But if it wasn't for my marketing team, I probably would still have 4,000 followers. They, like I said, they kind of create all of that stuff for us, and they post. I'm trying to get better. I literally block off a section on my calendar now, like for Instagram and Twitter, because I'm like, okay, I need to respond to certain things. I need to make sure that I'm engaging with these people that have now recently showed all this support. So I am trying to get better, but it's still something that I feel like is such a distraction, and kind of you can get sucked into and kind of cloud your mind. So I try to stay away from it as much as I can, but it's very hard when you run a business that's word of mouth and through Instagram, and you're promoting stuff all the time. So as you know, I recently launched my newsletter, the More Her Speed Weekly newsletter, and so I've just gotten an ungodly amount of support from that, and that I had created basically around community itself. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to make sure that I'm interacting with these women, and that I'm making sure that I'm highlighting the women that should be highlighted, and that need that space. So I definitely have been trying to get a little bit better at it, but before, yeah, it was ugly.
Yeah. No, it's not, that's what everybody says, love-hate relationship. And unfortunately, it should be this amazing thing that has only positive benefits, but unfortunately, that's not the reality of the situation, right? Like there's a lot of
Right.
ugliness that has to come out. It doesn't have to come out, but people, feel the need to share it. I don't
Somehow,
understand,
yeah, 100%.
especially in the sports world. But I want to point out, like, I did not send you my notes, but I feel like you somehow hacked into my phone and took my notes because you keep bringing stuff up. That's like my next question, or my second or third next question. Good for you. You're making my job way easy. My next question is going to be about your newsletter. Can you tell us a little bit about jeez. This is where I start like losing my voice too. Can you tell us a little bit more about your newsletter and why you started it and what the purpose is behind it?
Yeah. So like I said, back in July, I launched my weekly newsletter. I was getting just so many questions about how I got started and where I got started and how I, blossomed into this position, and what my struggles were and what my education was. And I was getting so many of those questions that I was like, again, this would be a disservice to not put this on a platform and make everybody connected. And I don't want it to just be me. There's plenty of women in sports that don't get the recognition that they deserve, whether that's because they're women, because the place that they're at, whatever the case may be. I want to put women in that place to where they do have a platform, and they can connect with each other, and they can know about, job opportunities or internships, or, you know, like I said, just the struggles that I went through, because there has been many of them. And I don't want anybody to feel alone in this, because it's a hard reality sometimes, being a woman in this space, just because you don't always have that overwhelming positivity or support from everybody, and sometimes you have to create that for yourself, and you have to understand that you aren't alone, and that as much as we hope it progresses, whether it does or it doesn't, that shouldn't change how hard you work. So I really just created it as something that, okay, let me reach these people once a week. And the newsletter is men or women. But this community is, like I said, something that I want to feel inclusive. And I want, whether it's men who work with women and have women employees or whatever the case is, for everybody to know which women are in which space. So whether it's a strength coach or, a sports specific coach in football or basketball or soccer, whatever it is, they can use their resources. So putting different women in different spaces on and allowing everybody to connect and network, within that same community. That's kind of my goal.
That's awesome. I feel like I love the name More Her Speed. I feel like that could be like a podcast or some kind of like video
Yeah.
series coming up. I don't know. That's what you have. Actually, I'm sorry I asked that because I kind of just remember what you shared before we started
Oh,
recording
that's all
about.
right. No, yeah, no.
I don't want to. I don't want to have to cut anything. I'm gonna be honest with you. I like to do as little editing on this as possible. So I feel like I set you up for sharing something you shouldn't.
No, that's all right. I've done like a couple of like public webinars.
Oh, cool.
There's one thing I can't share that is coming very shortly, tomorrow or the next day to be exact.
I'm ready with the
But
mute button just in case.
nonetheless, nonetheless, it's funny. Everybody's like, "Oh, I love that name. I love that name. How'd you come up with that?" And it was actually on a podcast. I was talking about me being in the physical therapy section and how that was very helpful and was very knowledgeable and definitely gave me a lot of background on where I'm at now. It just wasn't my speed because I was working, not that my schedule was slow paced, but the environment was slow paced. And so once I, like I said, kind of started working with the high school teams in the area and working more towards football, like it was more of a faster pace, higher intensity environment. And I realized that that was more my speed. So that's kind of
Gotcha.
where that came in at. And yeah, I think that it has definitely made sense. But that's the beauty of podcasts. You learn about yourself and you get asked these questions. And even if it's, I've been asked similar questions like this, but like I said, my answers change slightly every time because I am learning every single day, literally every single day. I'm doing more research or I'm getting exposure to something that I haven't, or like I said, just that willingness to take in new information.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think that's the sign of a good, you know, um, like a good mindset is that idea of just constantly growing, constantly learning, and trying to get better at your craft. I think that's something that we should all be striving for. So I think that's awesome. Now I have to ask because I'm competitive. You've mentioned you've been on a few podcasts.
I have.
I don't know how many you've been on. Like, where does this one rank? And you can't. Don't worry about hurting my feelings.
I wouldn't. That's top notch, top three.
Top three.
Top
Yeah. Now,
three.
have you actually done three?
Done more than three. So
All right, that's all I asked for. I'm not going to ask any more questions. Why ruin a nice moment? So I'll take that. Um, so let me ask you this, and I almost want to prep. No, I'm not even going to preface this because sometimes I get the same answer from people, but I think I'll get a different answer from you. So when it comes to, because obviously you said you're on Twitter and you're putting some thoughts out there, and people are giving you either wanted or unwanted feedback on different thoughts, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the science behind speed and performance training. All years you've been doing this, what is, if you had to pin, I'm sure there's like a whole list of things, but if there was one thing that you had to say, this is the one thing that every time I see this, I want to throw my phone or my laptop through the window because I hate this misconception about speed performance training, what would that one thing be?
um that's a tough question. We go over this a lot in our presentations. You always hear these myths like, oh, it's in your genetics, or, run on your toes, or, different things that they've come across through the years, or every workout has to be the hardest workout they've ever done. And I think all of those have small truths to them. Yeah, sure, your genetics play a factor. There is truths to some of these misconceptions, but I think that sprinting and running and data driven training is still so new, and the research behind it, JB Moran and Ken Clark, everybody who is doing all the research, is making it so much more well known, so that that information is coming out there. But I think that it gets watered down with Twitter and with you know strength and conditioning Twitter, or whoever it is, regular people who think that they know more without doing any of the research, that might throw off an entire post, because now the comment section is filled with people arguing rather than what the original message was. And though that's always welcomed on social media, I think that that's kind of the downfall of it. Is all we want to do is share our story and what we think works. And like I said, whether people have a differing opinion, that's okay. But I think that there is plenty of misconceptions, and all we want to do is either prove that wrong or provide the right information behind it to support what we are trying to say and support our system.
Got it. And so if you see a new piece of research, or a newer, let's just not say brand new, but like a newer piece of research, or something that, like, this new concept, how long would it take for you to feel comfortable just maybe start implementing it into what you're doing? Is there like a little bit of a process, or some kind of, I don't know, like vetting process that you go through to make sure that it's legit and that you can actually implement it?
Yeah, I think our team is really good at like sending things back and forth and asking like, "Oh, what's your thoughts on this?" Our programming has changed a lot in the last couple years. The basics still stay the same. We use fundamentals from years and years and years back, and just put our flair and our spin on it as new research comes out. So I think that one, going off of information that you trust, researchers that you trust, and two, reading more into it. So as long as you read the background behind it and can apply it in how it makes sense and will make sense to the athlete. You can't go to an athlete and say, "Oh, I have this new drill for us, but I can't tell you how it translates." As long as we know how they're going to apply it, then we can try it out. We always are down to see what works and what doesn't, but knowing how that will help that athlete, one, get faster, or two, be able to perform better in the game, then we're probably going to throw it out.
Gotcha. Awesome. So I've got one more question for you. Sorry, I lied. Two more questions for you. This is just a quick one. Who did you admire as an athlete growing up?
Ooh. um I grew up kind of watching baseball mostly. My grandpa played professional baseball very briefly. So honestly, professionally, like, I looked up to my grandpa because I thought that, okay, I saw that my grandpa did this, and I'm seeing these professionals do it. Like, I thought that that was the coolest thing. So anybody that I had as close to me, like, that's just kind of who I looked up to. And then obviously, as my career kind of evolved and took more of a football direction, then I started watching more football. I started watching Mike Vick. I started watching Randy Moss. I started watching Drew Brees. And, so I think that was a really cool transition, because when I was younger, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be the athletic trainer for the Angels." I always thought it was going to be baseball. And then, professionally, as that, changed a little bit, then obviously who I watched changed a little bit more. So I would say, and there's amazing female athletes. Obviously, Serena Williams is a huge inspiration, but if I'm going off of like what I watched the most, then I would definitely say, again, it's going to come from those areas and me watching my grandpa.
Awesome. I was not expecting that answer.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. That's awesome. Um, Also, I'm just gonna say this too. I wish you were working with the Angels, because I love baseball. It's my favorite sport, and I love Mike Trout. And
Oh man, that's a sad story right now, but yeah,
if you
the
could help
Angels
him
are
stay on the
a
field,
tragedy.
you know what I mean? That would be fantastic. Obviously, he's dealing with something much
Yeah,
bigger right now, but still,
right. I should have changed career paths when I realized how bad they were tanking. Yeah.
it's been tough. So much hope at the beginning of the season, and all of a sudden it just hit this wall, and went very sideways very fast. But I'm a Giants fan, so it's not like it's not going a whole lot better. But
Oh.
it's been tough. Oh, is that a boo? Oh no. It's funny. My one of my younger brothers is a Dodgers fan. So yeah. it gets wild here in the
It does,
Taco
I'm
household.
sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure. Oh yeah, it's you gotta pick a side and you gotta ride. You can't change up teams, and no matter how bad they're doing, gotta stick by it. It's funny. Everybody always asks me like, "Oh, who's your team? Who's your team?" Because I didn't grow up. My dad was a Rams fan when they were in LA, and then when they moved to St. Louis, he was like, "I'm done with them," kind of thing.
okay,
So football, he was like, "I'm not watching the Chargers." I didn't grow up with a football team. So then once I started obviously watching college ball and working in football, I started to talk more and started to talk trash about everybody's teams. And they're like, "Okay, well, you're talking like this. Like, who's your team?" I was like, "Oh, I don't have one." They're like, "Nah, you're not gonna do that. Like, you got to pick right now."
yeah,
So probably like 7, 8 years ago, they were like, "Well, who did you like? Who do you remember liking?" And that was the Chargers were the local team, obviously. So we
sure,
did watch the Chargers, and Drew Brees was on at that time, and so I was like,
right.
"Oh, I really liked Drew Brees." He was on the Saints, so then I kind of, I became a Saints fan. So I've been a Saints fan for the last 6, 7 years now, and whether they're doing good or doing bad, that's my guys.
See, there you go. That's like I completely agree with that. You guys, I don't trust people when they say they have multiple favorite teams. Like you can't do that. Like
Right.
how dare you? In fact, my brother, he was a huge Sean Green fan, and so
Uh-huh.
he kind of followed him for a while, and he was really close because he kind of stuck with the Dodgers once Sean Green ended up with the Dodgers, but he was very close to being a Toronto Blue Jays fan. I'm like, that could have been a tough road for you, my friend.
That would have been a long, long, dark road.
It would have been so you lucked out that he went to LA and then and kind of stuck there for a while.
Right.
But yeah, no. Anyway, I'm not gonna keep you here forever talking about baseball and sports because that could be a whole nother podcast. But like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. I have one more question for you before we get you out of here, and it's kind of the big question we like to ask at the end of it. And obviously, we talk a little bit more specifically about this our home team here in Sacramento, and like the legacy you want to leave for the home team. But for you, like I said, what legacy do you want to leave for your city of your area of Southern California, and then also just this our home team of athletics, sports, athletes, coaches in general. Like, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind when it's all said and done?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I say this all the time, but whether it's athletes or coaches, or more specifically, obviously now that I'm so involved with women coaching and women in sports, like you're going to fail, and that's okay. And you want to fail. You want to fail early so that you can fail often and fail hard. But as long as you take all of that and you learn from that and you learn from those mistakes, you have to understand that failure is inevitable and it's good to do that. If I didn't fail 100 times, then I would have never learned and I would have never been here. It's again this just kind of relentless journey of not getting so discouraged that you get in your own way and block your own blessings. Instead, just kind of using that as fuel and keeping that push and fail forward.
That's awesome. That was like a perfect soundbite. Just drop the mic right there. That was awesome. So if anybody who's listening is not currently following you on social media or your newsletter, all of that, where can they follow you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at Cici Murray _. I post a lot of content on there, and Twitter, which is at Cici Murray. Those are my two main channels. And then, as we talked about, I just released a newsletter. I will be dropping more information on that in the next coming days. I have a lot planned for that. A lot of resources within that, a lot of great community and discussion topics that I want to continue and build this community. So would love to have the support on there. The support so far has been amazing. But yes, all my Twitter, Instagram is pretty much the same as far as handles go. Follow me if you do not already. A lot of free game.
Yes, do it for sure. You'll get more content than you do from this podcast. So give her a follow and do yourself a favor. Cici, thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with us and talk with us and share your insight and your knowledge. We definitely appreciate it. And good luck with everything that you've got coming up in the near future.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me, Josh.